So as we all know, NFT royalties are a very hot topic. Let me just start by allowing the panel to introduce themselves. Let's start with Dustin over here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dustin. I'm CEO of DLI, Degenerate Labs Incorporated, and DAA, Degenerate Ape Academy.
I'm Scum. I'm an independent artist, formerly of the DGods team.
Hey, I'm Yan. I'm the CTO of Metaplex. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Josh, and COO, co-founder of Magic Eden.
Yeah. So clearly, we have a very star-studded panel. I think a lot of us are looking for some leadership and insights into what's going to happen with NFT royalties. High level, this past summer, there's been a bit of a movement which originated on the Ethereum side towards zero royalty marketplaces, whether it's an AMM or an exchange like X2Y2. And we sort of saw this trend migrate over to the Solana side. And it percolated when Magic Eden announced that they were moving to a royalty optional model. So let's start there. Jochan, talk to us a bit about how you guys came to this decision. I know originally MetaShield was a thing you guys were exploring, but then decided ultimately that royalties weren't the way forward.
Yeah, for sure. I think the starting point here really is when the first zero royalty marketplace launched on Solana. That was, I think, maybe three plus months ago, right? And we started thinking about this problem actually back then. And we actually started on the arc of let's build some royalty protecting tools. And for those of you that may or may not be familiar, we built this thing called MetaShield with the Coral Cube team, which allowed creators to basically see which NFTs were respecting royalties and which were not, and then allow the creator to basically do something with the NFT. In the case of MetaShield, it was like blurring the NFT by updating the metadata, right? And I think our experience from that was that we wanted the creator to basically own the decision around what to do with royalty respecting or royalty evading. And I think the ultimate vote from the community was that that's not the way they wanted to work with royalties or enforce them. And we basically tried to avoid the scenario of going to optional royalties in the first place. That was like our intent from the very, very beginning. But what we started to see over the 3-month journey was that given how high a lot of the royalties were, especially in the last 6 months of the NFT ecosystem, most of the volume for a lot of the largely traded collections were moving very, very drastically to zero royalties. And at that point, that's not only damaging for obviously the Magic Eden business, but it's also damaging as a whole for creators, right? But at the time, there was no burning platform for all of the ecosystem to come together to basically figure this out. The house view internally at Magic Eden is that this is a path that will play out in every single ecosystem. It just happened to have started first on Solana. So the bullish case here that I want to paint for everyone in the audience, and I think that the panel here generally agrees with this, is that if we find the solution, and we're obviously working very, very closely with the teams here like Metaplex, if we find this set of solutions, and it won't be just one solution, it'll be a range of royalty enforcement solutions, it'll be a range of royalty encouragement solutions, there'll be various carrots and sticks, off-chain solutions. But if we work on all these things, I'm actually extremely bullish that a lot of the creators will come to Solana because this is where royalties will be enforced. And the important point is that all of this is happening because, yeah, we wanted to basically bring everyone to the table. And we are very, very bullish on actually creator monetization in general. So that sort of sets the scene a little bit and I think opens up quite a lot of discussion for everyone here on the panel.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that overview. I kind of want to kick it off, actually, to Nan of Metaplex. So how are you guys thinking about this issue? What is your initial guess as to how this might be enforceable at the technical level?
Excuse me. Yeah, great question. So for those that don't know, Metaplex, every single Solana NFT is a Metaplex NFT. And so as Zed was actually talking through other ecosystems, seeing these problems, the interesting part is for example, Ethereum does not have an entity like Metaplex that could play a critical role in helping all of these dApps, all of these marketplaces enforce royalties. And so the way that we think about royalties or creator monetization generally is it's a choice. right? It's a choice for creators, and it's a choice for collectors to choose to support specific collections, right? And so from our position, right, we actually yesterday published MIP1, which is the Metaplex improvement proposal. And it's the long-form technical proposal for hard on-chain enforcement. And I think the key thing there is it's a new asset type, right? So creators, again, can choose whether they want to use a new asset type where royalties are enforced, and we're working with folks like Magic Eden and others to make sure that everything is compatible. Or the existing standard will still exist, and this is actually part of a longer narrative and arc of like creator monetization, like subscriptions, like utility, like other things that I think we're going to see evolve over time. And so, we're building this into token metadata itself. It's going to be supported in the base layer, and it's an option, right? Yeah, because it's built into token metadata, there'll be pretty interesting and/or easy migration paths for existing collections to upgrade to the new standard, should the collection and the community choose to do so.
Awesome, awesome. So I think we got a pretty good overview of the technical side of this space. Let's open up the floor to, I guess, the more creative side, the creator side, to Scum and Dustin from Degenerate Labs. What are your guys' initial views on this movement and some of the proposals that have been put out there to potentially solve this issue?
Yeah, I think that it's just a fact that code is law, right? And I think that as the creator environment, we want to foster as many projects as we can, as much creativity as we can. And I think that any system that really focuses on de-incentivizing somebody for being honest or maybe enjoying the arts or maybe being a part of a community is not going to work. It's like taxes. You pay more because you're honest. We all hate taxes. That's why we're here. I think that it's important to look at what that creator monetization looks like and how we can create platforms and opportunities for strong NFTs and strong creators to have a path forward, not necessarily relying on royalties. When I came into DAA, it was very clear to me that royalties were not going to build us a sustainable and global business model. It's just not an option for us, and we are one of the blue chips on Solana. Because of that, we are also afforded a lot of things that, and a lot of opportunities that creators that are coming in now don't have. And I think what's important is we look towards creating ecosystem opportunities and systems that can bring those individuals in, support them, and move them towards other business models, instead of looking at maybe direct enforcement or incentivization depending on how you look at it. I think that's the path forward. Teaching these companies how to build a sustainable business, utility, maybe funding that, and then building them into what you want them to be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But it does sound like we're almost nudging creatives into running businesses versus simply just creating art and seeing what happens. Scum, I'm curious to hear your thoughts based on the initial discussion so far.
Yeah, I think I'm curious if Metaplex is also working with other marketplaces, or if this is like furthering the Magic Eden monopoly on marketplaces as it exists right now. You have a large section of the marketplace.
I think
like,
that's
no shade. I'm just curious because Magic Eden currently aggregates one-of-one artists as well and gives people an option to not pay royalties there. And I'm wondering if the tools you're building will be able to be used on other marketplaces where artists feel safe transacting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're still sticking to our core principles, right, of being an open platform that anyone can use, and that includes Magic Eden and also all other marketplaces. Naturally being the on-chain representation for NFTs, like we're already integrated with all the RPCs, the indexes, the wallets, and the existing marketplaces. So we don't see this as something that's different.
Okay, so this is closer to like on-chain enforceability, access tools for everybody.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah.
But do you think, as an artist, this movement, assuming royalties become a thing of the past, which seems to be a thesis some stakeholders hold, does it disincentivize new creators from entering Web3 to begin with, or is it not as much of an issue as we're making that to be?
I don't think it's much of an issue for one-of-one artists particularly. I think it's an issue for artists who work for large projects who are reliant on or being paid in future royalties. I think that's an issue. because then the onus is on either the project to continue paying the artist, and their lifeblood's been cut off, given the working agreement. But for one-of-one artists, I think we make most of our income on primary sales, and we've seen this in the IRL art world. There's been government enforcement to make sure that artists receive money if there's a sale over 100x or something like that. I think that it just comes down to like how much governance we actually want on chain. I mean, it goes against the spirit of, I think, what we think cryptocurrency is, but at the same time, like, who do we really want to protect? And I think we need to protect the creatives in the space. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know what an NFT is without art.
Right, right. Well, actually, you brought up a good point, and I kind of want to open this up and have everyone chime in here. High level, what does the data show? Like, what percent of earnings have come in from royalties versus primary sales, based on your experiences, anecdotes, things like that? Yeah, we can start.
Yeah. So I think I'll share some stats, but I think one thing that I want to shed light on as a caveat, but also just an interesting thought for everyone, which is it's clear that basically there is no one-size-fits-all, and that became abundantly clear with the existing royalty model. So that's like point number one. Point number two, I think, is that the solution will also not be one-size-fits-all. And what's needed for one-of-one art versus music NFTs versus community PFPs versus gaming NFTs, it's going to be really, really different. And these creators care about really different things. So I think the important thing is, like, for someone like Metaplex, build the tools, right? That's really important. For Magic Eden, it's like offer the menu, right? For some creators, it's going to be, I care a lot about sovereignty and the importance of this permissionless bearer asset. And if that's the priority, then there's a bunch of solutions around that, including on-chain enforcement. If it's more around, kind of like sovereign assets and preserving decentralization, then I think there's other ways to basically meet the problems or solve the problems that creators have. So that's like the first thing. And then to the data point, I think this is also obviously across the board, so it's very generalized. But we found that the median NFT project made about 6% of their revenue through royalties. And over 90% of that revenue from royalties was made in the first week. And this is obviously, scum for non-one-on-one art, right? I'm talking pretty generally across all collections. And that trend in terms of royalties was declining over the last 3 months as we entered sort of more of a bear market. But that's some of the data that we had that we were looking at Magic Eden.
Right. And for the rest of the panel, any other interesting data points you might have found through your experiences?
Maybe not specific data points, but maybe more of a community sentiment. We were actually very surprised, like, given that stat that it's only 6% of their revenue and it was declining over time. We were actually quite surprised at the overwhelming support for something like a royalty solution. In fact, we were expecting a kind of like a spicy Twitter Spaces when we first proposed a solution, but in fact it was like, firstly it was 5 hours, so cap your Twitter Spaces. But then it was just like 5 hours of support for this thing. So I thought that was like surprising, because maybe we had just hit on a nerve here that perhaps didn't necessarily represent the data that we were seeing. Right?
I will say one other thing on this is that I think that's a really good point, because it hits at something harder than just should we or shouldn't we do royalties. It hits at this point of what do we think is important to grow this ecosystem like 100x, right? And I think fundamentally a lot of us, including Magic Eden, do believe that royalties is a really important part of this story to bring more creators to come into the ecosystem. And if that's true, if we all believe that, then it's a more emotional kind of, there's emotional importance to this as well. And I think that's something that we really, really, we found to be true as this whole discussion evolved. It's not just about the pure numbers, right? And I think that's really important to recognize. And hopefully we all feel that way, and that's what we're all trying to work towards over the next couple of years as we build this out.
For sure, for sure. And I think one point that you brought up earlier that is often suggested as a solution to this problem, outside of the enforcement stuff, is maybe we change the business models and perhaps do things like more primary sales, rely more on that for revenue versus an ongoing stream. Because when I looked at the data, I put out a report recently that focused on the Ethereum side. Royalties are very velocity driven. When the markets are hot, people make a lot. And when they're very cool, like right now, basically no one's making anything from royalties. But then the other side is, okay, maybe we just do more primary sales. And I call it the Larva Labs approach because CryptoPunks did this when they held off 1,000 of the punks for their team. But does this approach seem to make sense? Do we like the idea of more primary sales, or perhaps does this introduce any new problems?
Depends on who you ask on Twitter.
Fair.
I think there's a lot of ways to look at this, right? We can say that we can, Jordans are rare, but they still keep making them, right? People keep buying them. It's one thing, the original product market fit that brought these collectors here may not just be collectors, it may also be investors, and I think that's a very true thing. I don't think we can separate them and say that's one or the other. I think that's very real, and we have to admit that to ourselves. And I think that while that product market fit might not exist anymore and might not come back, there are still a lot of people that are kind of making plans around that and have made large investments into it. And so I think it's important for us to respect that and kind of move them into what the next meta or what the next kind of portion of our business is. So it's one thing to have a very expensive collection that was very early, has a lot of provenance, have a lot of people connected to it, and then say, we're not going to do anything else. No more digital products, right? And there would be a lot of people that would say that they're happy with that, but what kind of revenue models, what kind of value, what kind of utility can you actually bring of running that model, right? As an artist, maybe that's something you do. You just release the art, it's there, it has provenance, but someone like myself as a businessman, I have to build a future, I have to build what that company looks like, and I have to build that velocity, right? And so something that's not extractive, something that's not inflationary, it's a tightrope walk. It really, really is.
Yeah. I mean, if you rely on primary sales, you definitely have to go to market with a product built, whereas a lot of projects launch now with the intention of building a product. And then because there's a lot of speculation in the marketplace, it's relying on hype cycles and building that hype. And because there are a lot of investors, face it, a lot of people in the space are here to make money. It falls into the same cycle over and over. So I think maybe breaking royalties would ultimately be good for the health of the future of this, but it doesn't sit right in all cases, of course.
I think another point to bring up here that's kind of relevant is when we talk about royalty enforcement or the idea of a collection earning a royalty in the first place, one of the beauties of it is it's a very elegant way to ensure incentives are aligned between the original creator of the collection and ongoing holders. And if to the extent we skate away from this paradigm, it can almost produce ulterior motives where a creator might just make all of the money on primary sales, and that's that, and holders are holding the bag, so to speak. And more interestingly, it introduces a lot of these concepts we saw from the fungible token world, where we worry about insider holdings and allocation, pre-mines, and unlocks over time, where if an insider holds 1,000 punks, for instance, everyone's watching which ones are they holding, when are they going to sell, are they going to dump it at some point? So how do we kind of combat this narrative that's percolating around the incentive alignment for royalty enforcement?
Yeah, my 2 cents here is a pretty complicated, pretty complicated topic. I'm not sure we'll get there in the next 16 minutes, but the answer is always somewhere in between, right? I actually do feel like the best form of incentive alignment is always, the team or the creator owning some of their own stuff. But obviously that has its own problems. The other extreme, dropping a lot of primary sales, also doesn't always work. Even in gaming, for example, you just start to lead into like inflationary economies, which that's another really pretty big problem in and of itself. I think that from an incentive alignment standpoint, ultimately, it should be basically some agreed social construct between the creator and the community. Like for some, it will work well that it's owned. There's maybe some vesting. It starts to look more like a fungible token kind of thing. Otherwise, I kind of feel like that alignment's very natural in like in the one-of-one art kind of space, where you're kind of it's very highly curated and you have a very very tight-knit community of collectors, and you don't really need as much financial incentive alignment, so to speak, right? So I think the answer is somewhere in between, and creators should basically be able to choose from that menu of options. And I think the tooling and infrastructure just has to get there to meet that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I would also add, right, we've been talking a lot about the different types of creators and the types of value that they're bringing to these collections. I think that will determine the incentive structure that they want to do, but let's also not forget about the different types of collectors, right? And we've seen that there are those that really are engaging in the community and they're showing off their PFPs and they feel like part of a movement. Whereas there's also collectors that are just like flipping these things and they don't really care about the creator and they're just pumping some bags, right? So, depending on the value exchange, I think I kind of like agree with Zed here that we as a community need to come together and like provide a ton of optionality that can be enforced on chain so that different types of projects will emerge, right? Like I think PFPs are really great right now, but I'm hoping that in the next 12, 24 months, particularly around utility and gaming and these other things, we're going to see some breakout use cases for NFTs and NFT communities that aren't just about what the meta is today with like PFPs, generative, candy machines, some staking, some token stuff, right? And because of these new types of tools and utilities that we will provide, creators are going to be able to think out of the box, to deliver something differentiated while maintaining the incentive alignment with their target collector or community.
For sure. I think one interesting point, piggybacking off that a little bit, is in a world where there's ways to enforce royalties, whether it's through Metaplex's minting standard, one question that comes up is, as we use centralizing forces, whether it's one minting contract or even just the NFT collection holder having some authority over the smart contract, it almost feels like we're moving towards paradigms where it feels less like crypto and more like kind of a centralized pseudo-digital asset. I mean, my question with this is just, do users care at the end of the day? If crypto gets to hundreds of millions of daily active users, are they going to care about the nitty-gritty of like decentralization and provenance and ownership of their assets? Or do you think they'll embrace some of these solutions we've talked about so far?
I think people care about what that looks like at the end, right? I think they care about a blurred NFT. I think they care about a blacked out NFT. I think the idea of centralization, we lose any sovereignty if we go to enforcement of anything. I mean, period, paragraph, the end, amen. And I think we always draw that line. I think in Solana, we do that really well with the culture and kind of thinking of being the community chain. But any way you cut it, really, if we are enforcing a social contract, we are giving up sovereignty, right? It's not the code is law. And I think what really, at the end of the day, yes, we may have a lot of users, but I think a lot of people are in this community. A lot of people came to this community because they saw that they might be working against a rigged system, right? They might see that people had more unilateral power in the things that they owned and the things that they wanted to do. And I think that this is a group of individuals that is a much larger subset of the world right now than is represented maybe here in this room or even at any other blockchain convention, right? I think we looked at this system and we said, this is broken. We want to play without the guardrails. And I think as we bring these guardrails back into play, as we bring the sovereignty back into play, I think we might lose some of this initial magic that's part of this revolution. I think it's like what Tolly said at the Saga unveiling. He said a lot of people in NFTs don't see themselves as part of a technological innovation. They see themselves as part of a cultural revolution. And I think that that's where, in this space, in NFTs, that's where it's the most syrupy thick. And I think that's the most important part. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think basically there has to be, this is why, to the point earlier I was making, that there's probably some off-chain solutions that I think will be part of the mix here, where, one of the key things that we did at Magic Eden when we went to optional, which I think generally might have been overlooked, is that we moved the royalty to the buy side. And I think that's a fundamental shift and a really important distinction because it allows someone to make the decision as they are entering the community, right? And it gives the creator basically an opportunity to say, hey, you will lose X if you do not pay the royalty, or you will gain Y if you pay the royalty, right? And I think that's an important alternative way of enforcement that still allows NFTs to retain the current level of sovereignty and incentivize holders or buyers to effectively honor the royalties that that creators ultimately want, right? And I think this is my personal view. I don't know if this is actually going to happen, but I think we'll start to see experimentation around things like tools that are built off the back of this kind of data. I think secondly, we'll expect creators to basically come up with more distinct tiering of community membership, right? So it's going to be something like there's the freemium model, then there's going to be, if you pay 5% royalties, you'll get this other thing, and then you pay another 5%, you'll get this other thing, and that'll become potentially a different kind of model, but another way of basically enforcing. So one of the things that we are encouraging right now, and I'd encourage any developers out here who are thinking about royalties in general, we have a hackathon we're running at the moment. We've put up $1 million for it to basically incentivize developers to build tools like this. And obviously, we're going to adopt the on-chain enforcement, but I think there's going to be a category of tools that are sort of building and connecting off-chain dots back to the creator, back to the buyer, and encouraging people to basically pay those royalties. And I think it's going to be a mix of all of these solutions.
Right, right. And to kind of reiterate, because I think that those are very important considerations, it almost feels like an inevitable shift from a seller's tax to leave a community to a buyer's premium to enter. And almost based on how much you pay or tip or pay a royalty, you have these role-based access to the NFT's utility, whether it's a game or access to a community, a Discord, things like that. And it does seem to me like it's a pretty good solution that is in line with what the end user wants to do. So obviously, we talked about a lot of things just now. I kind of want to open up the floor to like, what other pieces to this equation haven't we thought about? Are there any other solutions or potential ramifications of solutions that maybe we haven't emphasized enough on this panel?
I think that consolidation in the Solana NFT marketplace is going to be a big theme as we move forward at this inflection point. And I think that the platforms that are able to work with these IPs, consolidate them, and make sure that we're not spilling their communities, and we can incorporate them and bring them into other like CPG verticals and goods, other digital products, games and things like this. I think this is probably the most important for me focus as we move forward. I want to empower other creators, other individuals, in something more like a brand elevation platform, right? In the fashion world where I come from, you don't just go and open 3 stores and call it a day, right? You go to one of the major houses and you present to them and you say, this is what I can do, this is what I accomplish. Now, some people might see that as centralization, but I see that as being able to utilize the knowledge and the talent that we've built to help the next generation come and be successful. Part of that business model may be having a piece of those collections as we push them out, but at the same time, that removes that the absolute necessity for that royalties, moves people into those primary sales, moves it into different verticals, and allows you to actually run a business instead of doing all those things I was talking about, by being extractive and being inflationary.
For sure. Any other thoughts in terms of other solutions or things maybe we are not thinking about enough as we grapple this challenge?
We tried to build MetaShield, and that didn't go very well.
Yeah, maybe just a thought on sovereignty versus, say, these like hard enforcements, right? A lot of the times at Metaplex, we've been thinking about this problem for a long time, right? So how do you provide the tools and also enforcement and give the freedom, but at the same time provide guardrails? So it's like this constant trade-off. And I think kind of where we've settled is like, okay, we give the tools and the options and people can choose what they want. But sometimes what we've observed is people don't understand what they're asking for, right? So when people say, hey, I want royalty enforcement, the implicit other part of that is, well, we also have to restrict your transfers, right? Otherwise, you're just going to like freely transfer them around and do OTC, and there's just like a million ways to work around royalty enforcement. So if you're truly asking for on-chain enforcement, you're also implicitly saying that you don't want transfers to be freely available. And so like from our point of view, right, there's a bit of like, okay, well, philosophically, are we for or against this? And how much of the guardrails should we provide, both to creators or to collectors? And how do we make sure that we're a positive, beneficial actor to the entire ecosystem? I think Zed said earlier, right, we want to, in order for us to all win, like this space needs to grow by 100x, right? Or we want it to grow by 100x. and so, we take on this question very, very seriously. And then I think kind of like where we've settled is actually there's many different layers of decentralization, right? First is self-custody. We've talked a little bit about that already. But then there's like a censorship-resistant aspect to it, right? So maybe you might not be able to custody or move your assets around, but no one can censor the fact that you own it on-chain, right? And maybe that's good enough for some collectors. Maybe that's good enough for certain collections. But as we think about more broadly what decentralization can bring, I think it's going to come with many flavors. And as we onboard 1 billion users, right, you can't expect all of them to care about the same thing, right? So, just a couple of thoughts there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd bucket into basically 3 categories. It's on-chain enforcement, number 1. It's off-chain encouragement, carrots and sticks, you can call it, right? It's like based on if this person paid, they will or won't get Discord access, right? That's sort of an off-chain example. And then 3 is like new creator monetization or business models. And I think all of these have generally been very, very underexplored. Like the design space, I think, is still extremely early. We obviously tried with the off-chain with MetaShield, and our learning was that a marketplace should not necessarily extend its reach that far, right? That should be ultimately a creator kind of decision to determine what should happen to the NFT, right? And they should press the button to basically say, yes, this is what I want to do with it. But I think those are the 3 categories, and I think if anyone's interested in working and experimenting with anything in those 3 categories, we'd love to talk. We'd happily back you guys, grant you guys, or even invest in people who are building these tools. And we want to work with teams like Metaplex and creators in the ecosystem to basically adopt the set of tools and standards that come out of this. And it has not been an easy few weeks or a few months. I'd say the last 3 weeks have probably been the most stressful in Magic Eden's history. I can say that with a lot of certainty. So we appreciate the community's sort of patience, and it's been amazing to work with everyone in the ecosystem to find a solution for this.
Awesome. I always like kind of closing this topic with this factoid, and I actually use it to open my recent NFT royalties report. So I wanted to actually get Scum's thought on this first, but then I'll open it up. So Van Gogh is one of the most famous artists in history, and during his life, he actually only sold 1 painting 3 months before he died for not a lot of money. But secondary sales of Van Gogh's paintings exceed about $650 million US. So the question is this dream that has never been possible in the traditional art world now dead in crypto? This dream of being able to earn money on royalties or on secondary sales through royalties.
Is it dead?
Is it dead?
I mean, I hope not. I hope that royalties from my work go to my estate long after I'm gone. But I understand that I'm also riding a wave right now, and I'll have to adapt as changes come. But no, I hope that this is the future of art as it's collected, and I hope that royalties are able to be enforced, whether it's physical or digital, through the blockchain. I absolutely hope that's the truth.
Any other thoughts? Still alive?
We're still kicking. Let's go.
I want to thank you guys for devoting so much time and energy to this. I can imagine it's been stressful. The community doesn't want to talk about sovereignty too much or decentralization. They want to cry fair or unfair. So I appreciate you guys devoting so much time and energy to the topic.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Well, guys, we had an awesome panel with some of the top thought leaders on this issue in the Solana NFT space. Thank you all for your time and for your thoughts.
Thank you, everyone.